So in the previous session, we discussed about splitting of salary. Now, if you take a consolidated salary, it will be fully taxable. Now, if you're going to take the salary with a breakup, you are entitled to certain tax benefits. So for this purpose, we have to split the component into salary, allowances, perquisites, retirement benefit, and also, so we can also call it as a PF, which is an important social security scheme which we have. So therefore, first we'll take about allowances. So before we go to the allowances, we should know what is an allowance, and then what are the tax benefits which are available to an allowance. So allowances means a fixed amount paid to an employee to meet a particular requirement of him, or his place of employment may require additional compensation. For example, take a house rent allowance. House rent allowance is an allowance paid by an employer to the employee to meet the house rent obligation of the employee. Children's education allowance. Children's education allowance is basically an allowance given by the employer to the employee to meet the children's education. City compensatory allowance. Now you cannot come back and say this is a particular requirement. The cost of living in cities are more when compared to other areas. So to compensate for that, an employer may provide for an additional allowance. For example, if you are posted in, say, a border area, a company may provide, I will give you border area allowance. Assume they put in Darjeeling. So Darjeeling, you need to have a special clothes in winter because it's going to be extremely cold in winter. So the company may come back and say, don't worry, we will give you a special allowance called as hilly area allowance. So likewise, when your place of employment is subject to an allowance, so that is also going to be called an allowance because the place they give you allowance. It could be a particular requirement. It could be a place which requires an extra compensation to pay. But what is very important, it's a fixed amount paid to meet a requirement. For example, a house rent allowance can pay 10,000 rupees per month. Whether you spend or not, is not an issue in allowance. Allowance is a fixed amount. It does not depend upon whether you actually spend for that purpose or not. For example, you may be having your own house and you may be staying in that house. Still, the employer can give you HRA as a company policy. The only question what you have to decide in that circumstances, what are the tax implications of the same, right? Don't confuse between the two things. So, like a salary, HRA will also be taxable on due or receipt basis, whichever is earlier. However, certain allowances are exempt from tax under section 10. Read with rule 2. An entertainment allowance is deductible under section 16 of the Income Tax Act. At this point in time, it is very important for us to understand the difference between an allowance and a deduction, or rather exemption and the deduction. Exemptions are given generally under chapter 3 of the Income Tax Act. That is before the start of the heads of income, it is given. So therefore, incomes, when they say exempt from tax, both income will be excluded, plus losses will also be excluded. Deductions are available under the respective heads of income. Against all heads of income, it is available in chapter 6A. So deductions can also result in loss. So because of deductions, there can be a loss. We have already seen in house property. Because of interest on capital borrowed, you get a loss. So on account of deduction, there can be a loss. That means deductions can be more than your income also. But when it comes a question of exemptions, exemptions can never be more than your income. That means it is not possible for it to get a loss on account of exemptions. And if you get it, that loss will also be ignored. For exempted incomes, you will not get plus or minus. That is one important difference. So now we'll go to the important allowances which are exempt from tax. The most important by big distance is the house rent allowance. As we already discussed, house rent allowance is given to an employee to meet his house rent requirement. So What is the exemption amount? The exemption amount is given under Rule 2A. So the exemption provision of Rule 2A specifies the exemption will be the least of the three amounts. So first amount is 40% of salary. In case if you are paying rent in Chennai, Kolkata, Mumbai or Delhi, that 40% will be taken as 50% of the salary. The second amount is HRA actual received. Now why we are factoring this particular point? We are factoring this particular point for the reasons already mentioned. I already told you exemptions can never be more than your income. To factor this particular point, we are adding HRA received as also part of your exemption. Excess of rent paid over 10% of salary. We can call it as rent paid minus 10% of salary. So the least of the three is going to be exempt from tax. Now, so one important question arises now. What is the salary? Is HRA a salary? Obviously, the answer is yes. If HRA is not a salary, why we are discussing this here? So if we're also going to include house rent allowance also for the calculation of that 40%, we will have a big challenge, right? If HRA is also taken in accounting, 5% manager is entitled to commission, 5% before charging commission. All of us would have done this easily, 5 by 100. 5% after charging such commission. Then slightly we are confused. Sir, 5 by 105. ஏன்டா போடணும் 5 by 105? அதான் தெரியாது சார், அதான் சொல்லி கொடுத்தாங்க போட்டோம் அப்படின்னு. So after charging such commission, there is a bit of a confusion. Yeah, அது நம்ம 11th standard accounts படிக்கும்போது எல்லாருமே ஃபேஸ் பண்ணோம். So இங்கேயும் one second, if you think, if HRA is also going to be salary, should I have to also include HRA there? That will make the life extremely complicated for all of us. Therefore, what each section of salaries chapter specifies, whenever they try to link it with salary, as what we have done here, with 40% of salary or 50% of salary, or rent paid minus 10% of salary, each section tries to define the meaning of salary. Now, this is one of the reasons why I already said salary is one of the easiest chapter in the class, but maybe a slightly difficult chapter in the examination because you have to remember a lot and you're going to go to the examination without any book in your hand. So therefore, find out some mechanism and technique to remember. The meaning of salary for the purpose of HRA is the meaning of salary most of the provisions of salary chapter except in 4 places. Except in 4 places, the meaning of salary is same. What is the meaning of salary? Basic salary. DA, which means dinner's allowance, which is an amount paid to the employee to meet the cost of living. Whenever the cost of living goes up, the dinner's allowance generally goes up. So to that extent, they want to keep it a little bit variable so that whenever the inflation goes up, the employee can be quickly compensated. But what is very important is dinner's allowance can also be taken into account for calculating certain retirement benefits, or this dinner's allowance, the employer may come back and say, I'm going to give this allowance, but when I pay a retirement benefit to you, I will not take this. For example, take the case of a leave salary. So what is a leave salary? Leave salary is very simple. Every year, I'm entitled to say 1 month leave every year. I can take, company says you can take 1 month leave. So I work for 20 years. I can take 20 months leave. But I am a very such a sincere employee. I have taken only 5 months leave. So what the employer therefore will do, 20 minus 5, 15 months leave you have not taken. I given you 20 months leave, which you have not taken. You have taken only 5 months leave. So you have not taken 15 months leave. For the 15 months leave, I will pay you salary, which is called as cash equivalent to leave salary not utilized. The leave which you have not utilized, I have to pay, which is called as a leave encashment. For this 15 months which I'm going to get salary, what is the amount on which I'll get the leave salary? That is the question. If the employer says you will get only on basic salary, then we can say DA does not form part. Suppose if the employer is going to tell me you will get on the basic plus DA, then we can come to a conclusion. Dinner's allowance is forming part of salary. So therefore, whenever for calculating of retirement benefits, DA is considered, then we call it as a DA forming part of salary. In some examination, they will give you DA taken into account for retirement benefits. Those are the two versions they give. But unless DA forms part of salary or unless DA is taken like a basic salary, you should not take for the calculation of HRA exemption. That is one important point. The last but not the least, which is not there in the section, it is decided by a very important Supreme Court decision, CAT versus Guest-net duplicators. What does this particular judgment say? It says normally if you take the case of sales employees, their salary will be very, very low. The fixed component will be very less, but their variable component will be very, very high. The company will come back and say, boss, we will give you a salary of 20,000 rupees per month. You do a sales of 3 times of your salary. Beyond this, we will give you 1% or 2% of as a commission. Beyond the sales achieved than the targeted. So I give you salary of 20,000, you do a 60,000 sales, you will not get any commission. The moment you do 70,000, for the 10,000, I'll give you 5% commission. That means my commission is based on the turnover achieved by the employee. So normally, in order to motivate sales employees, many employers come back and give this as an incentive. So the Supreme Court says this is as good as a basic salary. You cannot take this as a commission because for them, the commission itself is the basic salary because that variable component is kept high. The fixed component is kept very less. So therefore, we should take the commission like a basic salary, and therefore for calculating exemptions like HRA, commission must be taken. It's very important to note. Commission will be taken only if it is based on percentage of turnover achieved by the employee. Some examiners give it beautifully. 1% of the turnover of the company. Don't take because it should be turnover of the employee. Some problem says commission fixed amount. Don't take. It must be fixed percentage of the turnover of the employee. Some examiners specify 5% of sales up to this turnover, 6% after that. A lot of students don't take this. Ask them why. Sir, you only said fixed percentage. I said fixed load percentage. I didn't say same percentage. There is a difference between fixed percentage and same percentage. Percentage is fixed. Up to 5 crores or turnover is fixed as 1%. Beyond 5 crores, there is a different percentage. The percentage is only fixed. I have never said that percentage has to be same. Very common questions in the examination, common mistakes in the examination. You should avoid those mistakes. So we have seen what is the exemption amount, what is the salary for this purpose. And another important point before we catch up few questions on this is that some very interesting points you should bear in mind. No exemption under section 1013A if the employee lives in his own house or the employee lives in the house in which he does not pay any rent. Assume you live in your own house. You're not going to pay rent. You can't say I'm paying rent to myself. You will not get the exemption. The moment you live in your own house, obviously you will do one thing. You will also claim self-occupied as zero. You will also claim interest on capital borrow, right? So you can't claim 24B as well as 1013A. So you are going to be given benefit there. Unless you satisfy the condition of self-occupied property. There is one condition there in self-occupied. If you are not able to occupy your house on account of an employment being a different place, then you can claim the benefit of house property provided in that particular place you are going to pay the rent. In those circumstances alone, you can claim HRA for the rent paid there, self-occupied benefit here. If you're in the same place, you can't claim both self-occupied benefit as well as 1013 benefit clearly given in this section. You can't get both. The employee lives in a house in which he does not pay any rent. For example, you live with your parents. You don't pay any rent to them. You can, if you pay rent to your parents, you can claim. That's not a problem. But if you don't pay any rent, you can't claim exemption. Couple of other interesting issues are what if I don't pay the HRA throughout the rent throughout the previous year. or I don't get the HRA throughout the previous year. So will it have any impact? I'll just take you to the provision one more time. So from the provision, you can make one or two observations. Three factors are going to impact. Three factors: salary, rent, and HRA. These are the three factors which are going to impact your exemption: salary, HRA, rent. So now, if any of these three factors undergo a change, then you have to work the exemption differently. If any of the three factors change, you have to work the exemption differently. So what I mean by this, for example, if the employee does not pay the rent throughout the previous year, so for example, April to September, you live with your parents, don't pay any rent. That 6 months HRA will be fully taxable. For the last 6 months, you pay the rent. So now the exemption will be worked out by taking the salary, HRA, and rent only of October to March. So what effectively the section is trying to say, or the rule is trying to say, you cannot compare the three factors for different periods. For example, I cannot have a salary of 12 months compared with 6 months of rent or 6 months of HRA. If I get HRA for 3 months, my exemption will also be taken on the basis of 3 months, one. So similarly, if I don't pay the rent for the first 6 months, for that 6 months I have to pay tax. HRA was fully taxable. For the remaining 6 months, exemption will be calculated by taking salary, HRA, rent for those months. So similarly, if the employee does not receive HRA throughout the previous year, for example, he works with two companies. First company doesn't give him HRA, only the second company gives him. So then you have to take only those periods. For example, I get HRA only for 3 months, say from January to March 2020. The rent paid and salary of January to March 2020 alone will be considered for the purpose of exemption. So these are some very, very crucial points in HRA. One of the most sought after question in the examination also. So what I will do is, before we catch up with some questions, I will also finish some three important allowances under section 1014 with rule 2BB. Children's education allowance, which is exempt up to 100 rupees per month per child, subject to maximum of 2 children. Children's hostel allowance, which is exempt up to 300 rupees per month per child, subject to maximum of 2 children. Traveling and conveyance allowance, which are exempt to the extent they spent for official purposes. So these are the allowances which are exempt from tax under 1014, which are subject to. There is a long list of exemptions are there. I've just only gone through the exemptions which are very important or which are frequently asked in the examination. So rest of them, if you want, you can go through either our study material or institute study material, those who want to just have a go through. But if you look at most of the exemptions, only these three exemptions come in the exam. Only one important point here to be noted. So children's education allowance is exempt up to 100 rupees per month per child, subject to maximum of 2 children. That is one of the reasons why I just put a picture where it's available only for 2 children, just to recollect the same. But again, there's an interesting point. If you closely see that 2 children will look like a twins, right? So if you closely have a look at it, you will find as a twins. Now, after this twins, assuming the parents get one more child, so will they get the exemption? The answer is no. You get only 200 rupees and 600 rupees. 200 for children's education, 600 for hostel. Now, that is also the case in the case of my family. My sisters are twins. First sisters, elder sisters are both of them twins. After that, 3 brothers. Now, my father will get exemption or would have got exemption only for 2 children. Let's assume for a moment the first child is a single child. Second is this twins. Now, how much will be the exemption of the question? Matter went to the Supreme Court. RCC made a very interesting argument. First is a single child. Second is a twins. So therefore he said I should get exemption for all the three. So matter went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court gave a beautiful judgment. When your second child is a multiple birth, then the exemption will be available for all. So that means if the first is a single child, second is a twins, I'll get exemption for 3 children. If the first itself is a twins, second is a single child, I'll get exemption only for 2. Therefore, multiple births after the first child, all the children will be eligible. Instead of twins, if it is a triplet, you get exemption for 1 plus 3, 4. But however, the only thing which what I would like to bring to your notice here, many of your friends are getting excited about this example, they debate this particular point. Good, good starting point. But they don't discuss on business income, don't discuss on TDS. A lot of issues are there in TDS which are practically relevant. But just imagine for a moment, what is the tax effect of those 100 rupees per month into 12,200? Even if you're going to get 30% tax rate, 360 rupees. We have already read in our accounting concept of materiality. Immaterial. But it's a good starting point. Interesting, easier. But இதே போய் நம்ம டிபேட் பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கிறது ஒரு ஸ்டார்டிங் பாயிண்டா இருக்கணும் டு டிஸ்கஸ் bigger issues of business income, bigger issues in capital gains, which are highly in terms of amount and in terms of issue much deeper. But நம்ம என்ன பண்றோம், இதர இஷ்யூவை டிஸ்கஸ் பண்ணிட்டு அதை விட்டுறக்கூடாது. அதுதான் மோஸ்ட் இம்பார்ட்டன்ட். இட்ஸ் a good starting point for discussion. Another quick point you can observe here, children's education allowance is up to 100 rupees per month per child, subject to maximum of 2 children. The exemption is going to be dependent only on number of children, whereas there is nothing to do with the actual expenditure. So a lot of people ask me the question, sir, 100 rupees per month in education, sir, that is right. This amount should have been changed, not changed. But let's accept it. It's going to be a good question for the examination. 300 rupees hostel lunch, fair enough. But the context amount. We'll go with that. So first and second are not going to be dependent on your actual expenditure. Depends only on the number of child. Take the last one, traveling and conveyance allowance. Many a times you find your Swiggy boys and a lot of people are coming in the two-wheeler. They are spending every time they travel. Suppose if you put a wrong location, they will ask and come back and say, sir, if you put a wrong location map, sir, I will not get the reimbursement if I travel to a different place. So, from the hotel or restaurant from which you have taken to the delivery place, at the kilometer calculate money, they will pay the conveyance allowance. Beyond that, they will not be given. So, to that extent, there will be an exemption available for them, because any traveling or conveyance allowance is exempt to the extent it is spent for official purposes. So, the last one alone is based on whether it is spent for the purpose of official or not. If you spend for personal purposes, acceptable. First and second, nothing to do with whether it's spent or not. You have a child. If you have one child, you'll get 100 and 300. If you have two, you will get 100 into 2, 300 into 2. If you have 3, you will still get only for 2, unless your first is a single, second is a multiple birth. So these are the important points about allowances. We have already seen in HRA, unless you pay rent, you will not get the exemption. So these are about the provisions relating to allowances. So if you have any question on this, you just ask me. Otherwise, what I will do is we'll work out few questions on these provisions to understand, because I don't want you to burden with too many provisions without doing problems. So we have to solve few questions and then we can proceed. So meanwhile, if you have any doubts, you can proceed. So we'll now take an example where 5 situations we have taken. Salary 10 lakhs in all the situations. HRA 4 lakhs in all the situations. Rent paid 1 lakh, 2 lakhs, 5 lakhs, 6 lakhs, and 7 lakhs. 40% of salary. 4 lakhs. So HRA actually received. Given in the equation, we'll take the HRA amount. rent minus 10% of salary. So rent இருக்கு minus 10% of salary. So least of the following is exempt from tax. So least of following பார்த்தோம்னா நமக்கு this will be the amount exempt from tax. So taxable HRA will be, so whatever HRA you received minus exempt will be taxable. இதே இது அப்படியே நம்ம பேங்க் அதில் வந்து செகண்ட் அசம்ஷன் போடுவோம். நம்ம சென்னைன்னு எடுத்துட்டு ஸோ சென்னைனா நமக்கு 50% ஆஃப் சேலரி HRA actually received in paid minus 10% of salary. So taxable HRA, obviously amount received minus amount exempt from tax. So any observations பண்ணப்பட்டதான்றது பாரு ஆக்சுவலா